Louder Now podcast needs your financial support. You might be someone who's struggling yourself with your own mental health. You might be trying to support someone in their journey as they try to make sense of their mental health. Or you might be someone who's just curious in general. And if this podcast has helped you grow, learn, feel more hopeful, feel less alone, and really most of all, has helped you be more empathetic towards yourself and towards those around you, please make a donation. Go to the link in the notes and consider supporting this podcast monthly. It would be greatly appreciated so I can continue to bring value to you, the listener.
Little backstory of kind of your family and your brother and whatever you want to share with that,
Okay.
to kind of just help us understand how, you've been in this position of family member support and what that's been like and how that's affected you.
Yeah. So, I have 6 siblings, so there's 7 of us in total.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, there's a lot of us.
Okay.
Um, so
And are you in the middle or something, right?
no, I'm the second oldest. Actually, my brother that has the illness, he's the middle child. He's, like, right in the middle.
Okay, second. Oh, that's right. So you're like high up on the food chain.
Yeah, I'm one of the first ones. So I have an
Probably
older
not the right
sister
way to
and
say
then
that, but yeah. Okay. All right, nice.
So, yeah, so there's 7 of us total, but, I feel like, um I wanna say it's interesting because now that, like, I can look back, like, now that we're in the portion of the journey that we're in, like, my mom and I can talk about it and look back and see, like, "Oh, there was a lot of things he was going through in high school that we just didn't realize, like, was attributed to mental illness," but, so the technical answer to your question is definitely high school was when things kinda started,
Okay.
but, um I think for us, it started probably, I want to say like maybe 3 or 4 years after he got out of high school. He was like going to college. He went to LA Film, and so because he's always been into music, so
Okay.
he went to LA Film after high school, but he when he graduated, he moved in with a friend in LA. And so we didn't see him very often. So it took us a while to be able to see like things happening. Um I think for me the first thing I started to see that I didn't realize was his depression. But I just kind of, because I wasn't aware of like what depression was, I always just like was like, why is he always so sad? Um, and so I would see him, like, we go to concerts and stuff all the time. So like when we would go to a concert and I would go pick him up, like in my head, I was like, if I go to the house and like meet him and I'm like super happy, like maybe he'll like be happy too. Not understanding that it's
Yeah,
literally not how
my
depression
happiness will rub off on. Hmm. Why
yeah,
is he
so
sad? Okay, well, yeah,
yeah.
relate to that. Yeah.
It started with that, and then, I think maybe a year or so of that kind of happening periodically because he was still functioning. He was still, going to school and he had a job, and so on the surface, like, he was doing really well. And then for us, because we didn't see him every day, it felt like it kind of morphs one day from that to, him saying, like, people were trying to first it was people were stealing his things because he couldn't find, like, when he was in school, they gave him laptops, so he would always lose his laptop. He was always losing his phone, but he would be like when he would tell us, he would be like, "Oh, someone's, like, breaking into my room while I'm gone and stealing my stuff." So
Hmm.
we'd be like, "Move, like, just come back home, like, why are you still there?" But he would never leave, and so we could never figure that out.
Oh, because you said he was in LA, right? So the LA,
Yeah, he
you're
was
up there,
staying in
right?
LA.
Yeah. So like kind of a
So
paranoia or sort of
Yeah,
yeah.
so we didn't realize it was paranoia because we could never figure out, like, why he wouldn't leave, and then it went from, like, someone stealing my stuff to, like, I think they're trying to kill me, and,
Mm.
again, not being aware of anything mental health related, like, we're just taking it literally, so I'm, like, in big sister mode, like, "What is happening? Like, who are these people?" And
Yeah, yeah.
you
I'm
know,
gonna
like,
drive
that
all the way down there and
literally, like,
show 'em
literally,
who's
so
boss. Yeah,
I was totally in, like, protective mode, and so
yeah.
we would, like, try to beg him to come back home, but he would never leave, and then, I remember the day that I realized something was wrong. Still didn't have words for it or language, but, he was working, and he came to pick me up and drop me off at home, and, I had on this, like, floral dress that had like purple and red flowers on it. And when I got in the car, he was like, "Why did you wear that today?" And I was like,
Mm,
Because I was running late for work and it wasn't wrinkled." Like that was literally why I put it on. And
mm,
he was like, "Everywhere I've been today, like someone's had on a purple or a red shirt." And I was like, "Okay," like still kind of like, "Oh, like what a weird coincidence." And so I remember we were sitting like I will never forget downtown LA off of 7th and Figueroa and we were waiting for the light to turn and he was like red shirt, purple shirt, red shirt and like it freaked me out cuz I was like, "What is going on?"
mm,
And as like we were because he was driving, and as we were driving, I remember we ended up getting off the freeway and taking the street. So we were going through like Pasadena and there was some music on the radio playing, and he was like, "They're talking about me." Like, and then his paranoia really like the music was about him, and he started saying like are we don't have the same mom, and he was like, "You know that that's not really my mom, and I don't know why you guys won't tell me the truth." And he was like,
mm,
just be honest with me." And so like he was grilling me like, "I know you know the truth, like tell me the truth." And I'm in the car like, what is happening? So it kind of freaked me out, but that was the very first day I was like, "Wow, something else is going on." But I still didn't think like mental illness because I didn't know what that was, but I remember like that was the first time. Um,
mm.
so I think after that, maybe another year or so, he ended up coming home and cuz like he would periodically come home and he would like always pack a huge bag or like a huge suitcase and he
Mm,
would leave and we wouldn't see him for like 6 or 8 months. And then the next time I saw him, he would have nothing. Like no clothes, no bag, no phone,
mm,
like nothing. So we could never figure out like why like where is all your stuff going? Um
mm.
and then he finally moves back home and that was when we were able to see like some of his symptoms, and he wasn't sleeping and he was talking to himself and he was pacing and he
Mhm.
was really paranoid. So then that was when we really started to get like, I guess, a taste of like what it felt like to live with someone that had schizophrenia.
Okay, yeah, and I was gonna say, so yeah, the schizophrenia. And so, what was the diagnosis process like? Was that something that um was he like quick to see a see a doctor, or like was it easier that you guys were there, or because a lot of people take, there's certain stats that you hear, right, of like it takes whatever, multiple kind of rock bottoms to get help, or um right, that's a question you hear all the time, like, how do I get my kid to go to the doctor? And it's like, I mean, you could make them go. I mean, right, I mean, and not, and your brother's not a kid, right, he's like a grown adult,
Yeah.
but how did that happen? Like, how did you guys figure out that it was schizophrenia? Was that something that you knew, or that you Googled, or
That's where
what
a lot
is
of
going
people start.
on with my family? Right? Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
sure people write that all the time. It's like, that's a little broad, but no.
Right. Very, very vague. You can get a lot of responses from that. Um, For us, it took a while to
Okay.
get, like, a solid diagnosis. I feel like what most commonly happens, especially if people are, uh, hearing things, most, physicians will be like, "Oh, it's probably schizophrenia." So, I feel like that's where it started, and then I quickly started to realize I think someone threw out bipolar for a minute,
Okay.
um so we didn't do like the 5 or 6 or 8 or 10 diagnoses that some people do. So
Right.
I think we kind of went back and forth from like schizophrenia to bipolar for a few years, and then when he was definitely not open to going to get help like ever. We definitely had the multiple rock bottom type situations, and because he
Hmm.
was not, we did the whole I don't have anything wrong with me, like, it's you guys that need to be in the hospital. We did all of that. So, there was a lot of denial for a handful of years, and he
Hmm.
was definitely not taking medication. Medication was not an option. And so, for us, when we would, push him or try to, hold that boundary really firm for him to take medication and see someone, sometimes he would leave. And, I was just telling someone the other day, the only reason I have social media is because that's how I used to, make sure he was still alive. Because he would,
Hmm.
tweet or he would, post things on Facebook, and so, when I realized that, I got accounts and I started following him, so
Mhm.
that's the only reason I have the the social media accounts that I have
Instagram
now.
or well, I mean, yeah, I guess we're going back to well, 2007 or 8 was like Facebook, and then
Mhm.
I think I remember getting an Instagram like summer 2012.
Yep.
So I think, I mean, that's a while ago now. I mean, that's like
Yeah.
11 years ago or something. But
Yeah, but the Twitter, the Facebook, and Instagram, I got them only to, make sure my brother was still alive, so that's how I would, check.
yeah, yeah. Now it's like find well, some people I know can track where I'm at because anyway. But yeah, what are you doing in Anaheim? No. But yeah, I think too, like it's something like with the whole kind of diagnosis part, I think there is sort of an overlap of like someone who has gets a bipolar diagnosis versus schizophrenia. They are different, right?
Mhm.
There's my understanding, I don't know, my only experience with schizophrenia is um, being the times I've been in the hospital, like watching people
Yeah.
kind of talk to themselves. And I had a roommate, well, a guy that I was like in a room with when I went to Laguna Beach like the first time, and
Mhm.
I was like not sleeping. I was like in a horrible episode, and he would talk to himself all day, like, and he really wouldn't like leave the room unless it was like to eat, and like he would never go to group. I mean, there's not a whole lot to do at the hospital, but like you know, he never would, and he would just talk to himself like all night long, like he'd go to
Mhm.
bed. So I would just be listening to his um, whatever he was saying. I
Yeah,
don't
yeah.
know, like, maybe I don't really remember, but yeah, that's a really like I think when you observe that, um, mixed in with what you're saying, like not sleeping. My understanding of these things is that I think maybe like something like bipolar or depression, you could maybe manage without medication, or I'm more open to being like, I think you can manage those things without medication, possibly, or be on meds for like a short term period of time. That's kind of what I think now.
Yeah.
But something like schizophrenia, in my observation, is that you need sort of medicine. So I think when people have brought these things up, like we've talked about with the family to family, I'm like, I'm wondering if they're talking about schizophrenia because if you hear someone saying, how do I get my kid to take his meds? It's um, sure these things are really dangerous sometimes, right? I mean,
Yeah.
like when you're talking about so it took him a while to Well, also you can't make people like get help.
Exactly.
Okay. And so what was the time frame of like when he started doing better?
Um,
Or is it just kind of been like kind of up and down?
I would say we've kind of reached that space. Probably he hasn't been to the hospital in almost, I actually tell people that we've been doing this about 11 years, and it's probably been like more like 14, 15, because he hasn't been to the hospital in what, 6 years almost? So
Oh,
it's been
wow.
a
Okay.
while. We've still had like a couple of close calls because within that 6 years, he was taking medication in like the pill form. And so, if you miss a day or you miss a week or whatever, then things kind of start to happen. So we've had those like highs and lows for sure within the last like 6 years easily. But as far as like him being in the hospital, it was
Hmm. You said 6 years. That's a while. Yeah.
yeah, it's been a really, really long time, and the last time that he was there, I was actually talking about this in our support group on Tuesday because
Hmm.
someone asked me, like, what made him, like, decide to get help, and I was like, "I honestly have no idea." I just know that it was, like, around Mother's Day in
Hmm.
what was that? 20
Well, 6 years ago was like 2017.
Yeah, I was gonna Oh, you know what? It's been longer than that then. Because I wanna say hold on, I can tell you exactly what year it was. It was because there was an album that came out that year, and I wanted so
Hmm.
badly to, like, share it with him, but I couldn't because he was in the hospital.
Right.
But that last time, um, he was in the hospital, he was in a locked facility. And so he couldn't get home, and, it was 2014. So it was almost 10
Oh,
years.
wow. That's like when I moved to Pomona.
Yeah,
Um,
it was 2014, but
wow, that's almost 10 years. Well,
yeah,
well,
so
now,
actually my math is off.
me too. Worst subject in school. So,
Same. So yeah, I've been saying like 6 or 7 years, but it's actually closer to 10. It was 2014. Um, but it was around Mother's Day because I remember I made
mhm,
this like photo album for my mom, and I had to take it to the facility for him to like sign it and sign her Mother's Day cards. Um so I remember very vividly like what time of year it was, but he was in that facility for maybe like 2, almost 3 months. He was in there for a while, and I
oh,
remember
that was the last time
yeah,
it was
and
serious.
like
Okay. Wow.
when we would visit him, he would be like, "I just want to come home." And we were like, "Listen, you can't, like, you're here because you refuse to get help and take care of yourself and
Right.
take care of your
Right.
mental health." And we were actually about to get him conserved, and so I was about to have him sign the conservatorship paperwork because I was like talking to him a while about it, and I was like, listen, like, we don't want to control you, we just want to make sure that because you're an adult and because when you're not doing well, like, it's hard to have conversations with you and on your behalf, like, this will be one of the ways that we can kind of make sure that, mom and I can take care of you and make sure that decisions are being made and like you're being healthy. And so he was against it. So it took me like a week or two to talk to him about it. And once he was finally about to agree to sign the conservatorship paperwork so we wouldn't have to go through all of the things, um,
Mhm.
he ended up getting out. And so that was the last time. And like I said, like since then we've definitely had the moments where he's almost had to be hospitalized or he hasn't been consistent with his meds, but as far as like him being so bad that he has to be hospitalized, it's been a minute. But I still
Mm,
don't know to this day like what clicked for him. For me, I feel like it might have been, I think at that time he was so
mhm.
sick of going to the hospital cuz he was, for a minute,
Right.
he was in and out like almost often. Like I can't even count the number of times he's been
A lot.
hospitalized.
Yeah.
He's just
Was
been
it
in and
always the same place or different places?
It was always different places,
Yeah.
all different places.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think it's interesting because um, the rock bottom thing, or if you don't have substances in your life
No.
or you're abusing, right? It doesn't sound like he has that. Um, I mean, yeah, the hospital is an interesting place to observe people, and like on one hand, you could feel gratitude being there, be gratitude that comes from comparison, right? Which
Yeah,
usually we say,
yeah.
well, don't compare, right? But it's like unless you just don't talk to anyone the whole time you're there, which usually my experience has been that even like the shyest people, if you're there with them for 4 or 5 days, by day
Yeah.
5 they'll probably be your friend, because it's like there's not a lot to do here, right? So you just literally, it's like going to, not to make light of the hospital, but I'm just saying, like, it's like going to camp with like
Mhm.
your church or something. It's like you just become best friend, and so that's it's awesome because you really hear people's stories, and you could say, oh wow, I have like a family that I'm going back to, and I have a support system, and then you can learn that a lot of people are way worse off than you just happen to be in the same place together, So, but yeah, but it doesn't always. You would assume that just going one time and having a really hard, 3 days would
Mhm.
make a person be like, "Oh, I'm never coming back here again." Um, and so so because I think it's like the whole acceptance thing, right? That kind of
Mhm.
comes up with these. How do you get okay? So, and then it seems like because you guys are so close and supportive, him maybe coming home to your sort of family unit is similar to going to the hospital, just obviously without the hospital, right? Because I feel like
Yeah.
I had that my first two bipolar episodes. I didn't go to the hospital, but I came to California, and it was my mom, and later my parents got divorced. But in the first time they were together, and like that actually was super. Like they helped me and my sister and my brother-in-law, all those people. That was not the same thing as going to the hospital, but the support
Mhm.
system was there, and so yeah. And then what is his like? What do you guys? So do you just feel like less worried now because it's better, or is there always still like a percentage of worry based on obviously the history?
Yeah, so I feel like a very interesting thing happened with us. Before we got him to move back home, like he was so paranoid to come home because of all of the things that were in his head about what would happen if he did come home. So it was hard for us to get him here. And then once we got him here, um, it's almost like it's his safe place, so he doesn't leave the house very often. So we're like, "Go do some things and get out into the world." But,
Home too much.
yeah, 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 so it's been
House
like
arrest without the law
being
or whatever.
forced to
Yeah,
be house arrested,
yeah.
yes.
Yeah, some people are like, "Oh man, I do that all the time and I'm fine." So
True.
you're not fine. Get out of the house.
Exactly, like, I get it because I feel
Like
like at heart
COVID
I'm a
without
hermit,
COVID.
but also
Yeah, yeah. So okay, so he's home a lot, but doing good.
yeah, but I feel like, I think there's always gonna be, like, that worry in the
Sure,
back of my mind, just being prepared to kind of jump back into crisis mode if need be. But
sure.
I think because of the education that I decided early on that I was going to like submerge myself into, and even like the ways that NAMI, like we try to teach families and family to family like how to pay attention to what's going on with your loved one specifically. I think because I have been able to do that and tune into it very well, we know, like we can kind of gauge, like it always looks a little different when he's not doing well.
Mhm.
But it's I think we've been able to avoid crisis all these years also because I know, like, if he's doing this set of things, then he's just probably having a bad day. Or if he's doing these sets of things, like maybe we need to revisit medication, or if he's doing these sets of things, like, okay,
Mm,
we need to really intervene and figure out what's going on before this gets really worse. So like we have
yeah.
these kind of like stages of understanding like how his habits kind of form. So I guess that's a good thing about him always being here, because we can kind of gauge and figure out what's
Yeah.
happening.
Well, yeah, I mean, that makes sense because I think there's um like the worry and the fear that's sort of maybe the person who's going through it. Like if my experience of me, right, and then like people who are around me, like my friends, not everyone has been around when I've had an episode. Now, people that I live with currently were when I went through this like 4 years ago, or 3 summers ago, for sure. And so there's always this sense where you think, are people like always worried that I might have an episode? And I guess that could make you feel, instead of feeling grateful, like, well, at least I have people that care,
Yeah.
like the girl that made the comment about the sugar in the coffee. She can get away with it because she's cute. But just kidding. We'll cut that out.
You hear that?
That's weird. No. Maybe I'll ask her to be on the podcast.
Yeah, there you go. Look at that. Look at that.
Oh my gosh, I'm a dork. Okay, I'm just kidding. But like, yeah, it goes. It's kind of like a double-edged thing. Like, it's good that people care about you, and maybe some of what makes this hard is kind of what I feel like I've learned too, being in these family to families, being, getting to share my story, is that because like you you want people to kind of like leave you alone a little bit because that's just part of um like, hey, I'm a grown man, I can take care of myself, right? But if you take that too far, then you don't let anyone ever love on you.
Mhm.
And so people worrying about you can be out of love, and it also can be because you've been out of control before, right? So it's like a little mixture of both. So it does take a little bit of like um kind of some like humility sometimes to just sort of let people worry about you, but like, there's a balance, right? So
Yeah, I
I'm
was gonna
sure.
say, I think
Yeah,
for us, because I never really, like, it took me a minute to think about it from his perspective.
right.
I was always thinking about it from like his sister's perspective and being a caregiver, and like I have to worry a little bit because I need to be prepared. But then I really started to realize, because I feel like he got on our case at one point about like essentially what you said, like, back up and like let me be. Like, I can still have a bad day. Like, just because I'm having a bad day doesn't mean that I'm having
Well,
a psychotic episode. You know what I mean?
yeah, well, also, yeah, that's the other thing too, is that um there is a difference between just having a bad J versus like, 14 bad days in a row or something. It's like,
True.
oh, that's are you going towards an? Yes, it is different. I think if someone has a history of symptoms, right? Like
Yeah.
one funky, you know, just whatever. I went to the DMV and it took 4 hours, and yeah, we've all had days where you get a flat tire on the side of the road, or everything takes like an hour and a half longer than you wanted, and sure, that's just part of life, even in America, right? Even in our sort of um, kind of blessed sort of world that we're in, you know. But yes, you're right. Like, what's the difference between a couple bad days versus like you want to stop the person from having another episode and
True, but to his
yeah.
credit, I think we would do things like, early on, we would do things like, "Oh, I saw that you were talking to yourself a minute ago, like, are you okay?" Like, you know what I mean? Like, we would
Oh,
do
right.
things
Okay.
like that, and he would be like, "Listen, I'm fine, like, you talk to yourself, like, I hear you talking to yourself sometimes, like, so relax, like, let
I
me
talk
live."
to myself in the car so no one can see. No, but yeah, yeah, yes, Yeah, yeah.
So, you know, like, we had to learn how to just let him be and then trust the things that we had kinda learned in the process as
Right.
well. So, there was a huge learning curve for us. So now when I see him, like, talking to himself, I know he's taking his meds and doing all of the things, so it's like, it is what it is, and, you know, to his point, we were definitely, like, I guess, like, kinda helicoptering him a lot, and, so it took us a while to learn how to back off. It's just it's this dance that you have to kind of figure out how to learn because, like you said,
Mhm.
yes, there's a part of humility on his behalf, like allowing people to love on him and care about him, but also there's a responsibility that we have to kind of back up and let him live his life because
Mhm.
he's not going to learn or be able to kind of really take ownership, I guess, of like his mental health and his recovery if we're always like, "What do you need? Are you good? Do you need me to help?"
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
we
well,
can't do
that's
it.
that yeah, that's not always a straight and narrow path of stability. That can be messy. That's just part of loving people, is taking those chances. But I think too what stands out, because I've shared this on the podcast many times, and then when I've had the opportunity to speak, which is like, the part of the story that's like, hey, well, what keeps you stable, right? And I go, well, it's not just one thing, right?
Yeah.
I think that sometimes that's, we think it's one thing. I mean, it might be, but for most of us, it's community is really important, connection to people, um, not necessarily sharing your story, like going to support groups where people have similar struggles as you, but also just having good friends in your life. That,
Yeah.
they may not like. Not all my friends are bipolar. I mean, I don't think they are, but right. But just having good friendships. Which, by the way, yesterday was National Best Friends Day.
Oh, wasn't I missed it.
We missed it. We should have done the podcast yesterday. So,
Right? We missed an
but
opportunity.
um, best friends. Well, I'm just telling you now. Um,
Forever.
telling you now. But like, it's always a combination. But I think that the idea of community, though, um, I do think in our kind of uh, America, at least, I'm sure that this could be true other places, but it can be highly individualistic. Like, I make my own way. I'm hustling and grinding for myself, and sure, we're working hard for other people too. Like if you have kids or you have a family, that's obviously a different level than like being single.
Yeah.
And so I think there's resistance to getting help a lot because everything is like, I make my own way. And so, but really, community is getting better with other people,
Mhm.
right? Or like learning about how to get better. Healing is like a tribal thing, right?
Mhm.
Like if we were living in a tribe somewhere and it was like you see the same like 15 people every day, sure, they would probably annoy you, but you would be like, if someone was going through a crisis, the whole, so sometimes that gets a little bit left out. It's like
Oh, yeah.
your brother is his own man, but he's also a part of your family. and,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
so I think that's hopefully people can find hope in that instead of like maybe frustration, like, oh, I hate the community that's around me, right, or whatever, I just want people to leave me alone. And it's like, well, yeah, so you're right, there's a balance between like you can't fix him and then also you want him to. So that's cool. I mean, it seems like he's doing good now.
Yeah, he's doing really
Yeah.
well. I mean, I feel like he has his moments, of course, but I think for all intents and purposes, like I guess you can say we've conquered like the medication beast and we've conquered like the denial beast. So he knows that, you know, he has this illness and that's what he because I think once he started to kind of recognize like, okay, I have schizophrenia, um, there was like this small moment of time where he was like, I have it, but I only have it right now and it's probably going to go away. So that was really interesting to go
Hmm.
through, but I think he's gotten to a point where he knows like something that is a part of my life, and I think he's done a good job of kind of helping himself get to the realization of like it doesn't define who I am. And I always
Mhm.
tried to make it a point to tell him that like you just have schizophrenia. Like you're not a schizophrenic. Like it doesn't define the individual that you are.
Right.
Similar to if, you had diabetes, or I have like 4 toes, or I have like, you know what I mean? Like it doesn't make you any less than, it makes you, maybe a little bit more interesting, like one could argue. So
Like, hold on, hold on, let me count my toes. Wait. No, I'm just kidding. Does the cat? No, sorry, not making light if you.
no, 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 but you know what I mean? Like I
Yeah,
never
yeah,
wanted him to feel like it was a burden, or
yeah.
like it was like this thing that defines who he is. Like this is who I am. I like to do these things. I have skip. You know what I mean? Like it's just a
Yeah.
part of whatever is happening in your life. So I think he's doing really well with that. I think that there are ways that this has challenged, like, I think I guess you can say like his self-worth. So he feels, less than, or sometimes less adequate, or less capable. That's what I'll say. Um and it's so interesting because when I look at it, like even when he graduated from LA Film, because he graduated last May with his
Oh
um
yeah, nice.
audio engineering degree. And so like we were all so like excited and proud, and he was proud of himself. But I think what took over more
Hmm.
was that the anxiety of like, shoot, I'm graduating and I don't feel like I can retain everything that I learned. So then when he went to go apply for jobs, he didn't feel qualified. So it did different things for us because we had a different outlook. So it's been interesting to kind of see his journey since he's graduated, because I see him fighting with that self-worth. Like, because people will always tell him he's always making music and he's always doing things. And when he shows stuff that he's done to people, people are always like, I can't believe that you actually made this. Like, this is
Hmm.
incredible. But when like, what he hears and the filter in his brain is like, oh, you guys are just saying that because you know me. Or so I'll do things where I'll just like play some of his music, and people will be like, what is this? And he's looking at me and he's like, really? But I'm like, I just want you to understand that it's a genuine appreciation and a recognition
Hmm.
that you are really good at what you do. So you just have to learn how to believe that for yourself and not think that we're gassing you up, because that's what he thinks. He thinks that we have to say those
Yeah,
things, you know?
interesting. Yeah. Well, yeah, I think these, um, which has come up on here a lot with different people and my own thoughts and like, yeah, it's a identity, right? Or even the way that we say these things, like I am fill in the blank, right? I
Yeah.
mean, I am a man, I am a Christian, I am whatever, right? And so, yeah, these symptoms are something you're dealing with, like you're saying, it's there's different levels probably, but sure, people saying that something's permanent and going to be the rest of your life is probably how most people default to thinking,
Yeah.
because maybe it's taken them a while to accept it, and then it can last long. But I personally would want to more lean on, like, I think there could be a way where maybe that's not true, right? But you're right, like our identity, there's already a certain level of maybe sadness attached to the thing that the doctor's telling you or something, right? But there's more sadness if it's who you are, like
Mm,
completely, like 100%, right? That's
yeah.
that's where these conversations to me are like, it's not so much about the idea of the stigma for some people would be like they're just so maybe not accepting their thing. So it's like maybe practice sharing with and the whole thing about connection, but then it's also like, yeah, I get that because it's like I could see bipolar as holding me back from really living like the life that I want or getting the things that I want, having a like marriage, kids, um, making more money. I could tell myself that I'm not getting those things because of this diagnosis, but then someone else could look at me and have a different story and
Right.
say, "Whoa, dude, you're doing pretty great for someone with bipolar." And
Yeah.
you go, "Well, that's not good enough. I don't like what you're complimenting me." No, and so I mean, even
Mhm.
if we don't have a diagnosis, can we have a hard time taking a compliment because
Oh, for
of
sure.
some kind of insecurity or sabotage or imposter syndrome that we have about ourselves. So yeah, there's layers to it. It's like you know. So yeah, the fact that I'm glad to hear that he's like feeling good and that you guys are. So what has your like how did you get involved with NAMI? And because you were kind of saying earlier, like you've learned things, and that's obviously part of your job. But how did that whole thing happen?
Um, yeah. It in the midst of um like the I guess you would call them like the crisis years for us. My mom was just looking for help. Um and I think that someone at our church either told her about NAMI or she stumbled on it. And she found out about the support groups, and I think she also found out about family to family, and it took me a very long time to like want to go to the support groups cuz at that time things were really hard. And my mom and I had like at that moment in life we hadn't really said anything to anybody about what was going on. Like it was just my mom and I. Like no one else was living with it. No one else was dealing with it. No one was managing it. And we weren't talking to people. Like when I tell you we were isolated, it was just if it wasn't my mom and my brother being ill and me, it was my mom and I like just trying to figure it out and just live life. So
Hmm.
when she first was like, "Let's go to these support groups," I was like, "You can go by yourself. Like, I'm not trying to sit in no room with people and talk about all of this because I'm already living it and I'm tired. I don't know what to do. I'm frustrated. I'm sad. Like, I don't have the capacity to like what is talking about it gonna do?" So it used to like annoy me when she would ask me to go to the support groups. And then I finally went one day and um it was like when you hold your breath for a long time and then you finally breathe, it's like, "Ah!" Like, that's how it felt to be in a support group because it was like remember, like, we were completely isolated, so, like, hearing other people talk about some
Hmm.
of the exact same things that we had been dealing with, be it, you know, calling PD or calling folks to your house and like they're like, "Oh, he's not sick enough to 5150." And then you have to figure out
Hmm.
how to, make it through the rest of the night because he is clearly not doing well.
Right.
Or,
Right.
him forcibly getting removed from the house and he's like screaming on a gurney like, "I hate you and I'm never going to talk to you ever." Like, you know what I mean? Like all of these
Yeah.
things that you feel like you're only going through by yourself. And so to be in a room with a bunch of people that are like, "I just did that this morning. We did this last night. We've been doing this for 10 years." So it was like, "Whoa." And so
Hmm.
that's kind of what started to open me up to some of the things that NAMI had to offer. And then I think shortly after that, we took family to family. And then for me, and I share this when I teach family to family, at that point I think the class it's 8 weeks now, but at when we were taking it, it was a 12-week class. And I think the communication class was like week 9 or 10.
Okay.
And I remember that was the class where like I always say, like, I understand intellectually, like when people say, like, oh, I had a light bulb moment, but I've never had
Mhm.
one myself. In that class, I can remember feeling like, I think a light bulb just went off over my head. So, like,
Nice, nice.
that was kind of when I decided, like, you know what? I have to figure out how to not let
Mhm.
this define me or him or our
Right.
family. Like the way we're living, this can't be it. So we have to figure out something different. And I think that's kind of what changed the
Hmm.
trajectory of
Yeah,
what I was doing.
yeah, yeah. That's really good. Yeah, and I mean, I think too um, the journey for people is um, like you're using the word like learning or education or just um, you know, for the person who's got the thing. It's like I, I've been doing this for like 15 years as far as like seeing doctors since 2007, but I think this stuff stretches, obviously before that too, right? And so the kind of trying to read about it. I mean, obviously I have a podcast, that's what we're doing right now, working with NAMI. That stuff is all um uh, there's a self I don't know if selfish is the right word, but it is about me to an extent where I'm doing it to help myself,
Hmm.
right? Like obviously I have to go see the doctor and I have to go see the therapist. Um, and I don't, I mean, I like my doctor more than my therapist, but he's probably not listening. So, but like, right. So some of these things you do to survive. And then, but then the other layer is what I hear you saying is like to kind of get past just surviving,
Hmm.
right? Like get past just what do we do in a crisis? What do we do in a crisis? Get to a point where um, there is no crisis,
Right.
right? Or get to a point where the crisis is minimized because the person and you are having a better understanding of what's going on. And I think that's a struggle for a lot of people
Yeah.
because it takes time to kind of understand things. And I know when I've kind of sat in on these classes, you can kind of just there's a certain energy that that's different because it's like it's real um, concern. Or I guess that thing I just
Hmm.
did in May with you last month, one of the ladies was like, "Can you come over to my house and hang out
You
with
told
my
me
son?"
that.
And I was like, "Dude, that's rad. Like, I don't know if I'm allowed to do that, but yeah, sure. No, here's my business card. Here's my
Right?
here's my website.
Professional friend.
Well, no, no, and so it's really, really like really like that's the real life stuff of you know my faith influence of like that's what love is that kind of thing where it's like someone's really hurting and I think we maybe put pressure on ourselves to try to understand everything,
Hmm.
right? And sure, there's if someone's suicidal, you're not inside of their mind. You don't know how long they've been having those thoughts or even maybe why they're there.
Right.
They're probably scared of their own thoughts, right? So sure, going to a hospital is not gonna make someone just totally 100% better because eventually
Exactly.
they're gonna have to leave and come back to their community or lack of community.
Right.
So
Right.
anyway, it's just interesting to get a different side of sort of some of these talks because you've been doing this like you said. I didn't realize it went that far back. You said 14 years or you said 11
Yeah,
years
it's
or
been about 14, so I need to adjust that. I'm shortchanging us by a few
we won't
years.
ask you how old you are, so don't ask the woman how old she is. So
No,
um
don't.
no,
I'm
I'm
just
kidding.
kidding.
But
It's fine.
so yeah, like so you work with NAMI, brother's doing better. Kind of as like a concluding thought here, like usually when I end these kind of talks, like I did want to ask you what you read. You put that you love to read. I'm like curious what you're reading right now. That's just for fun. But
Ooh,
what do
gosh.
you you've already kind of given some sort of advice to people, but like if someone's in a position like you, family to family or not, right? Meaning like
Mm,
they're in the class or they're not, but they're thinking about it, right? What sort of advice would you give to them, or encouragement or
hmm.
wisdom? The person that's like kind of like you, like, oh, my son's going through this, or my brother's going through this, or my, you know.
Yeah. So many things to say, but I think the first thing that I always push is education. Um and not just like a quick Google search of like what is bipolar or what is depression or what is
Right. Well,
PTSD. Like,
WebMD.
yeah, no, none of that. Like really truly trying to be intentional about understanding, yes, what the illness is, but really trying to transpose some of that knowledge into how is this showing up in my loved one. And I get that it gets a little difficult because some folks never get an accurate diagnosis, but to the extent that you can, right? I think for me, that is I feel like that's the only way, one of the only ways that you can truly get through this. So education is really important. And then I think that for I'm just gonna say for me, like this increased it strengthened my faith a lot. Like, because there's so much of this that is unpredictable and you can't explain it. You can't put words to it sometimes. And I think that if you don't have anything spiritual to stand on, this is really hard to do.
Hmm.
Um, and again, like faith and spirituality isn't for everyone. So, not knocking anyone that doesn't subscribe to that. But for me, I
Yeah.
don't know that I could have gotten through this without my faith. And then I think the next thing is to really find community, right? Like, because the way you're talking about, like, how you need community and how it's important for, folks that have mental illnesses to have community,
Right.
it was important for my mom and I to, like, kind of get off that island that we put ourselves on. So once I started to, um, talk to my friends about what was going on, or even my other siblings about what was happening, some of the folks that I talked to understood and wanted to really, like, help and support, and other folks didn't, and that's okay. Like everyone is where they are. But for the folks that made the decision to actively get involved and support us and support him, it's made a world of difference. Because it allows you to take the time that you need to kind of rest and recharge. It gives you an outlet to have those conversations, to just talk about, what's going on in your frustrations. Or, sometimes people are like, let's just go to lunch because you need to laugh. And, you just
Mhm.
need an hour and a half to just do whatever. Those things are important. So I would just tell someone to in all of the ways that the system can beat you down and make you feel discouraged, and the situation can beat you down and make you feel discouraged, understand that you're not doing it by yourself. And it's really important for you to connect with people, whether it be through an organization like NAMI or some other organization, or even just with your village around you, to just connect with folks and let people pour into you and support you and uplift you. And then I think the last thing I would say is resources. Like really get familiar. Sometimes you have to fight and dig for those resources because there's a lot of stuff out there, but it's also very hard to find. And I work in the mental health
Mhm.
space, and sometimes I meet people and I'm like, you guys are doing what? Why did I know about this?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, the internet as as a tool is, even me saying WebMD is like, maybe don't use WebMD. But
Yeah, no, do
right,
not.
right, right. Maybe don't do that. Yeah, no, no. It's beautiful what you're saying. I mean, I think sometimes the struggle can be, if you feel like you go to a, like, in your mind you're thinking, oh, if I show up to this group, I just did the NAMI support group with Dina and Sally and Carmen, and it just like last Wednesday, like not
Okay.
2 days ago, like the week before, and it was great. And I was like, oh wow, I haven't really done this in a while. I mean, I have like a men's group I go to on Mondays, but like not mental health related, just kind of
Mm-hmm.
like, but I think the idea is like, I think sometimes what holds us back is that we don't want people to give us advice, right? Even though I think in some situations you might need advice and
Yeah.
you just got to kind of communicate like, hey, I'm not looking for advice, I'm just here to share. So I
Yeah.
think there's like a fear of like going to these things and then getting frustrated at like something someone says to you, like, hey man, why don't you just walk around the block 3 times, like that'd be really good for your heartbeat. It's like, well, of course it would be, right?
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
You're like, cool, well, what does your Fitbit say, or something, right? Like there's sort of this kind of these walls that we can put up of like, well, no, whatever has worked for me has worked for me, and I'm,
Yeah.
and I think it's real painful things for people sometimes, but that's just part of the connection. Is like, you don't need to go and get advice from people
Mhm.
necessarily. If you want that, ask for it, but then you have to be okay with being frustrated at what you hear. you hear,
Yeah.
right? So, because I think that maybe that's the misconception. Because like I've done that where I'm like, no, I'm good. I don't need to. But also maybe have people in your life too that are like just friends, like what you said about go to lunch and just like laugh and go to movies, and you don't need to like bring up
Mm-hmm.
your anxiety or your you can, but like I think sometimes the situation is it's like kind of like don't do that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
do both. Like have your support group, go see your therapist that you don't want to see. That's me. And getting the thing, but then also have people where it's just like about connection.
Yeah. I mean, it's a layered thing, and you have to figure out what works for you, right? Like, because I think that there's also this level of, at least what I experience now being on the other side and like helping people in the support groups or helping people in family to family. Um, what and I get it because we were there too. But what I see a lot is I think that sometimes people don't want to have those conversations with others because like when you're not doing what you're supposed to do, um and then that's the advice that someone gives you, it kind of makes you feel like, like, oh well, I can't do that. Like with some folks, some people have loved ones that are really violent, and there's this one lady that always comes back, and she is always like, it's like literally life or death type situations, and she's like, but I don't want to, call the police because they're going to arrest my kid and I don't want them to go back to jail. But then I'm like, but you have to look at the alternative, like your life is in danger. So at what
Mhm.
point are you going to set that boundary and be like, this can't happen anymore? And like I said, it's easier said than done, but I also understand because there was a time where he was living on the streets and he was
Yeah,
homeless for like 3 or 4 years because it was like, you can't keep cultivating the things that you're cultivating in this house. Like, it can't happen. We don't want you not to be here, but in order for you to be here, these are the rules. And if you
yeah,
can't follow those
yeah,
rules, then you have to find somewhere else where you can do what you want to do because it's not going to be here.
yeah,
And again, easier said than done. But, and you have to, I'm just his sister, right? But like my mother was saying this to her son, her only son.
hmm,
Like, you know what I mean? So it takes a level of like understanding that sometimes you have to do the hard thing to get through to the other side. So I think that that's sometimes why people don't want to talk, but then there's also like, to your other point about community and just finding outlets and stuff. I have a friend who also has a brother with schizophrenia, and we've really cultivated a strong friendship over the years. And so when we have our girls' nights, we're like, listen, first hour that we're hanging out, we're just complaining about all of the mental health things. Like, go. And then after that, we're not talking about it anymore. Like we're
Okay.
talking about everything but that. And we're just hanging out, enjoying each other's company. And, so we
That's
make
cool.
space for it. And then we're like, after that, put it down and we're not picking it back up until we have to.
Wow, that's really good. Yeah. Wow. Well, awesome. Okay, so for fun, thank you for being on the podcast. I appreciate it. Appreciate your friendship, and we've been doing a lot of presentations together over the years
We
since
have.
4 years now. So, and one time I DoorDashed, I think, in your apartment complex.
You told me. So the
But
next time you have to
I
text
don't
me.
know if that would have been a weird text, like, "Hey, what's going on at 11:30 at night?" No, I'm
That
kidding.
would have been like,
Come and hang out. Let's eat this DoorDash food. I'll give it to you instead of the customer and use my
I
job.
would have said that.
No, I'm kidding. You were like, "Oh, you should have come and said hello." So,
Uh-huh.
okay, I've dropped the ball on you multiple times with that, but we'll get
All
there.
good, all good.
What are you reading? Because you said you like to read. I like to
So
read too. I'm trying to read more. So,
interestingly enough, I don't know if you'll want to read this, but I'm in this fellowship right now. And so I'm reading this. I can actually tell you exactly what it is because it has like a really long
oh, wow.
title. It is called it is the Truth, Racial Healing, and Transformation Implementation Guidebook. So that's what I've been reading.
Real short title.
Yeah, so I don't know if that's something that people want to go grab and pick up, but it honestly is a really good read. It's a lot of information, but really just the work that I'm doing with this fellowship is really trying to infuse like equity and like a form of like racial healing into like systems that aren't traditionally set up to foster those types of things. So just really learning about how I can infuse some of those techniques and like principles into like the work I do with NAMI, and just really trying to find a way to just be impactful to the community. So that's what I'm reading right now.
Oh, wow. That's okay. I might have you send me the title. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
okay. Cool. Well, I appreciate you being on the podcast. Do you have any you're on Instagram, right? You want me to put your Instagram in the
Child, no, you don't have to do that. Because
Okay,
it's private anyway, so.
she doesn't want no Instagram followers, guys. So
No, I don't.
don't be
I'm not
sliding
on
into
it.
her DMs.
No,
Anyone.
no, please. No, please. I'm okay.
I mean, no, I'm kidding. But no, only slide into her DMs if it's like you want to give her like $100 gift card to Target.
Listen, I'll take that all day long.
Something cool, not just like, hey, what's up? How's it going? So you'll be like, no thanks. So I don't even do that, guys. So no, for you to be on here, and I appreciate your friendship as well. Yeah, thank you.
Yours too, friends. I'll
All
talk to
right.
you later.
Okay.
All right,
Bye.
bye.